Good morning, everyone. We're so happy that you can be with us this morning, a small but mighty group. Yeah, we hope that you've enjoyed the conference thus far. Make some noise if you have. Yes, okay. Before we do panelist introductions, I wanted to just share some general housekeeping with you. Today, leading the discussion is Deputy Director of the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, Bob Peterson. Yeah. So we are so excited to meet some of our Friend of Housing Award winners and benefit from their wisdom. That is our purpose today. We hope to get a lively discussion, even though the group here is small. If you have any questions, we want to try to do this organically. We're going to start first with prepared questions and then kind of check in with you and see. And you can also just raise your hand if you have a question, like a burning question. Okay, so with that, I will pass it over to Bob for introduction.
Good morning, Anna, and thank you for preparing all this. She gives me copious notes, and I feel very well prepared, so there should be no hiccups unless I just don't read what she's written down for me. Again, I'm Bob Peterson, Deputy Director at the Housing Finance Commission. I've been at the Commission since January 10th, 2000. Took a brief 2-year, couple-month break to work for a housing authority and graciously came back to the Commission, and have enjoyed my career through the Commission. So it's my privilege to introduce to you 3 of our winners of our Friend of Housing Awards from last night. And the first introduction I have is for a winner of our Home Ownership Equity Award, and that was branch leader and mortgage originator Jessica Talton. Then the winner of our Unsung Hero Award, Home Ownership Counselor Tina LeBouvier. And I'll edit right here, I've known Tina for more than 40 years. We have family connections and we've been friends, so it's really rewarding to have a person you've known since you were youth and see how our lives have come out, so great.
Yes, I know him as Bobby, not Bob.
So feel free to call me Bob because that's what everybody calls us up at work. And then I have the great honor of introducing the winner of our Margaret Seavey Lifetime Achievement Award, Mark Cantor, who's a shareholder and founder of Cantor Taylor law firm in Seattle. Mark. And a part of my career, I was manager of a tax credit program for 16 years. And Mark was one of the people who educated me so much. My first year in the business, the program fell apart during the recession of 2007 through 9. And our state was one of the first ones to get active and get back going. And it was with his help that we did that. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to work with all 3 of these people. And Jessica, you've had some great things happen in your career recently. So here we go with some questions. All right, here's our first question. In a few sentences, tell us about what you do in affordable housing. And we'll start with you, Jessica.
So I'm a branch leader with Movement Mortgage, and I also originate loans.
Okay. And can you talk about how you go about finding people of color in your programs you're managing?
So I've been in this business over 15 years, and I got in the business to be able to be a resource for my community. So it's just been a lot of community advocacy, educating the community, going into churches, talking on panels, social media, just being very present and just trying to educate. And I think that when you go out and you give, it's reciprocated. And so the business just kind of comes. I don't necessarily go out hunting for it. So I think just showing up, educating people, and being a resource, and then word of mouth.
And when you asked about what brought you to this work, you mentioned before urgently about the obvious need for lack of representation. How did that affect your career?
So it's been a journey. I started out at Wells Fargo, and let's just say there was no one that looked like me at any of the business meetings. Just no African American loan originators literally in my market. And so there was a point in my career when I didn't put my picture on my business card because I didn't want people to count me out before they actually had a conversation with me. And so that was my strategy going in, to get the people to at least have a conversation. And then I think from there, once they connected with me and saw that I was able to provide them with options, I just started to create a brand for myself and a reputation. And from there, the word of mouth just started to kind of trickle in, and the business grew from that.
Great. Thank you. And Tina, my question to you, adding on to those sentences about what got you into affordable housing, when asked why you do what you do, you said many first-time home buyers, especially those with lower incomes who have been disenfranchised and need confidence in the ability to purchase a home. You also mentioned the excitement about seeing people come full circle. So can you share a little more about what inspires you, maybe a particular story about someone you helped?
What inspires me to do what I do is I'm excited about getting to see people on the best day of their lives. They are so excited to have accomplished purchasing their first home. As a fourth generation homeowner, I didn't quite understand the thrill of someone being a first-time buyer and a first-generation buyer. It's quite an accomplishment. So I get excited just knowing that I was a part of that. Now, sometimes, folks need a little bit of tough love, and they also need encouragement to know that they can do it. Just because they're the first one in their family to purchase a home, doesn't mean that it's not impossible, because it isn't. It is possible. One of the stories that I like to tell about coming full circle is one of the first homes that the Homeownership Center of Tacoma sold was to a woman who was a bus driver who had 2 daughters. And the daughters were probably preteen. They were like 11 or 12, something like that. And of course, we worked with their mom to purchase the home. Well, when one of those daughters grew up, her mother said, if you want to buy a house, you go see Tina. And she did. And so I helped inspire 2 generations of purchasing their first home. And so I am excited about the legacy buyers, the ones who saw their parents achieve something which led them to believe they could achieve it as well.
Powerful story. Thank you. And Mark, when I asked what brought you to your work, you said you wanted to use your law degree to advance social justice. What led you to this?
I think it was my parents, very socially committed. My dad is a lawyer in a small town in West Virginia. And this was back, I think, when lawyers really were looked up to and had a mission, and they were so well respected. And I think of To Kill a Mockingbird, and remember the attorney there, Atticus Finch, how he was what he was in society and in that community. And now, frankly, law is a business, and you miss a lot of that sense of that you're social justice or the purpose that you're serving. And so I always had the desire to kind of continue that. And then I fell into what I do. You know how life takes you on different paths, and you heard last night, I don't know why I was in Seattle. I came out for the summer, ran into my wife, and that kind of started it. So then I, fell into it, and I'm really so excited to be here with you guys because my first client in affordable housing was Homesite, doing a home ownership program. And so I think what you guys, that holds something dear to my heart just because that's how I started. So I think it was really that notion of being an attorney and how you use that for something to benefit society.
Your dad was a community lawyer, and you became a community statewide national lawyer.
Thank you.
So those little seeds of how they grow and
Yeah.
how they created a career from all 3 of these fine people is just overwhelming. It's heartwarming. All right, another question we have for Ernest. Okay, story time. We know all about your stories, or some of your stories at least. Can you share with us a time when you went into a really challenging situation and came out with a really big win? Or if not a win, a big lesson learned? So Jessica.
Yeah, so I'll say in my career, it's just been a challenge. The loans that we do are a little bit harder, right? They're not your perfect credit with massive amounts of down payment. And so it takes a little bit more work. And when it's when I was an individual before I grew out my team, it was a lot of hours, and I have this desire to want to change the world, right? So I want to help more people. And so coming up in corporate America, especially starting out at Wells Fargo, it was really challenging to get support, to find leadership that believed in the vision, to give me the same support that I saw some of my counterparts have that didn't look like me. And so finally I landed at Movement Mortgage here, and it's going on 2 years under Allie Lord, and sitting down and talking to her about some of the things I've experienced and what I need in leadership. And that wasn't an easy conversation to have, because let's be clear, you gotta be careful what you say these days. I wanna keep my job, but I also wanna be transparent about what I'm experiencing and the vision and where I know things can go. And so she heard me out, and I was able to get support. So now I have 5 loan officer assistants that are helping me with these loans and transactions, which helps us have a bigger impact, because when it was just me trying to do this, I can only work so many hours in a day, right? But I did as much as I could because I knew the mission and the vision. And so now being able to, I found a voice, right? Surrounding myself with the right people that pushed me to have that voice. And now we have this big, massive team that we're hiring another person on, right? Because they see the results. They see that the vision's coming to light. And I didn't just talk about it, right? We showed them that, look, if you give the support, look at the results, we can do the work. And then just finding the people that we're adding to the team that have that same passion, so it shows up in the conversations and the handling of the clients. And so I think that that was a big win for me in my career and for my community, because now we can service more people and give a little extra TLC, you know, because it's more of us. So.
Great. And Tina, your story time. Of all stories you've been involved in, some I know of because I worked with you and some over the years. What was challenging, and then how did you handle it? Was it a win, or if it wasn't a win, what lesson did you learn?
One of the most challenging opportunities I had was back when I first started in this business. It was a pilot program that didn't get much support. And so every 6 months we would have to present our case to the city council, and they would vote on it and fund us an additional 6 months. Well, there was one particular client that I remember, and she was a Native American woman, and like many of the clients that I had encountered, she couldn't get any lender to take her seriously. She came to me, she'd gotten a loan. There was one of those lenders back in the old days that was a little questionable, but she came and she had $35,000. Well, no realtor was going to take her seriously, even when houses were much less expensive than they are now. Still, $35,000 wasn't going to get her anything. So she came into my office and she told me her story, how no one was taking her seriously. And I told her, I am going to take you seriously. And I did, and she ended up purchasing a home. And so when it came time for us to present to the city council again, I asked her, could you please come and tell your story? And she did. She had the city council people, they were in tears because this story was so compelling. And so that is one of the big wins of my career. And then later on, years later, I saw this same lady and had passed by her house because I lived in the community, and parked out front. She had a nice BMW. Oh my God. Okay, so that means that it works. When you empower someone to purchase their own home, it helps them financially, and they are able to do other things.
That American dream, that human dream of exception.
Yes, indeed.
Great start. So Mark, I know as a lawyer, in your years, you've had some stories about challenging situations and a big win, or not a big win, but what'd you learn?
You know, I think one of our biggest challenges when we started our law firm, we didn't know whether to buy or rent a copier. And we had to call my wife. No, no, in all seriousness, you know, I don't have a particular win because I think, we work on so many transactions and they're all so challenging. And they've gotten more challenging over the years as the financing has gotten harder and harder to put together. But I remember one of my young associates listening to him on a call, and he got all flustered and told the client, well, I'm not sure what to do. And when he got off the phone, I said, look, never do that. I said, we are here to make the client feel comfortable. So you tell him exactly, oh, don't worry, we have it under control. And when you hang up, you might go, what the heck are we going to do? But you have to find a solution. And so I think, my biggest, my success is telling everybody that I work with, don't worry, it'll work out. And then finding a solution. Because these transactions are just really, really hard these days. And so it's always finding a solution.
I'm a witness to don't worry, it'll all work out. I've heard that several times, and he was very, very humble because he's done over 800 transactions, and you would think that it'd be rote, there'd be a book, and you just, no two transactions are alike. Different challenges all the way through, and stressful challenges, but the village works together, gets to success in the end.
Can I just interrupt for a second and say that one of the reasons that we're able to be successful are people like Bob and the Finance Commission, because we do work in other states, and a lot of times those agencies, they're not necessarily your adversaries, but they're not particularly helpful, and Bob and the Commission have always felt have been partners. So
We're all team players. We all do a little bit. Many hands make the light work. Next question, thinking more broadly for a moment, what are the most significant barriers to achieving equity in either homeownership or rental housing, and how do you begin to address them? This is a big challenge, and I know we'll start with you again, Jessica, since you're closest.
Okay.
And you're doing it right now, so.
I think some of the biggest challenges are down payment, credit, and just financial literacy. So it's just when we connect with clients or we're out in community, we're just educating people, right? There's no judgment. It's a safe place. Come with all the questions. And I think just educating people on credit, how to utilize it, how impactful it is, right? How you handle it. And then even, I think, what is it, Oprah Winfrey that says it's not about how much money you make, it's about what you do with what you make. And so it's like just educating people on how they're spending their money, right? In different ways that they could handle money. And then just presenting them with the resources that we do have, like that the commission provide. The Covenant Home Ownership Program has been a game changer for people. Literally, when I found out about the program, I went back through my database and book of business to look at all the clients that had lower approvals that just weren't finding homes, and we reapproved them with a higher down payment, and now they're homeowners. People that have larger families that only qualify for small condos, right? And now with this money, they're able to go purchase that single family home for their family. And so I think just educating people, giving them resources, and it's never a no, it may be a not right now, but this is how we're gonna get you there. And then we do checkpoints with clients, right? So we don't just send them on the way, we continue to check on them and encourage them and keep them uplifted so that they stay focused on that journey, because it's easy to get distracted a little bit when you're out there on your own. So just making people feel like they're not alone and it's gonna happen, the end goal, which is home ownership, because that's the way to wealth, right? So what is it, over 90% of millionaires accomplish their wealth through home ownership and real estate. And so you asked me earlier what I do. I get the opportunity to create millionaires through home ownership, so.
That's a powerful answer, Jessica, because you said something very important to me about being positive. We got to be real, but never kill our dream, but tell them there's a path to getting there. So you keep hope alive, so thank you for doing that. So Tina, how about for you? What's the different barriers have you had to achieve and you've seen in helping people achieve equity in home ownership or rental housing?
I think the biggest barrier is mindset. That a lot of folks, especially now with the prices of homes being what they are, I think people they defeat themselves before they even start. So it's just a matter of being the great coach, being the great cheerleader, being the great educator, and convincing people that yes, they can. They can do this. So once you get past the mindset that this is something achievable, then from there, it's up.
Well, Jessica mentioned literacy. You play a big role in literacy, so maybe talk about that and how you educate people.
I like to give people some tough love because sometimes you can't take the nice and sweet approach. Every once in a while, you have to say, kindly, of course, listen, you. Okay, we're going to do this, but I need you to do A, B, and C, and I will do D, E, and F, and we can get to Z, which is what you want to do. So yeah, there's tough love, there is support, there is maybe going above and beyond. If you're out in the community, you know, every once in a while, I would see my clients at the grocery store. And so it's being able to talk whenever. So being available for people when they need you, that's, I think, what's really important is building that trust, building that, the trust and the comfort level, and of course, like as Jessica said, literacy. Literacy is so important. I've been banging that drum for years. We need to teach literacy at the high school level. And then so many people wouldn't be stuck on the collegiate level with the level of student loan debt that they have if they had a bit of financial literacy going in.
I
Thank you.
remember early on working with you, Tina, you had this worksheet that was phenomenal. Now, even though I have a 11 by 17 spreadsheet for my budget and my finances, this was a very, I won't call it simple sheet, but a great sheet that I took back and gave them members of my church. And it would help people understand budgeting, because people, they don't know, they just live paycheck to paycheck. And having them write it down, something I learned from watching you work, and that was a great
Thank you.
tool.
Thank you.
Now, Mark, you're a little bit different because you're in the multifamily area. So what does equity look like in achieving it in your business?
You know, mine's a little harder to talk about my direct role because as the attorney doing the financing, you know, we're at the 30,000 foot level. But so I think the real issue is what clients can we assist and who's doing what? And I think you're seeing more and more in the commission's part of emphasis on having BIPOC organizations, community organizations participate in the housing and the development. And so it's being able to be involved in those projects. Oftentimes they're joint ventures with a more experienced developer, and so it's kind of working out those relationships. The other is we spent a lot of our time working with some of the groups on the east side of the mountains here doing farm worker housing, and I think, you know, there's a huge equity issue there. And so I think mine has really been more at the higher level as opposed to you on that direct human level, which is, you know, a whole specialty. You know, I'm very touched by what these guys are saying because it's much more direct involvement, but I think we try and do it from working on the projects as a whole. And fighting NIMBYism. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, you all know, and particularly in the home ownership, I'm sure you experience it. So we deal with that a lot and trying to help the clients, you know, work their way through those issues.
That's priceless advice. So really appreciate that in your business.
I want to tack on to the NIMBYism, but from a different point of view. When I got started, I was in a community that had been redlined, disinvested, infested, a lot of negativity, and it was important to change the perception of that community. And one of those changes is folks were concerned that there were outsiders coming into their community and trying to make these huge changes that would not benefit them. I found that it was really important that I live and work in the same community. And that gave such a level of trust because the clients knew that they would see me in the grocery store and that I didn't just pack up at 5 p.m. and go, you know, up north to Bellevue or some other place. I was right down the street where I would be in the trenches right with them. So building that trust, it comes from a variety of areas.
Thank you. Good answer. All right, next question. Big picture again. Gentrification is a significant issue, especially in cities where costs are going up so much. And it's not just in the big cities, folks. It's in some of our smaller, especially our farm worker communities. What strategies can be implemented to prevent further gentrification and from displacing low-income communities while maintaining affordability? I'm gonna start with you this time, Mark. And multifamily, you mentioned NIMBYism and so forth. How does gentrification fit into all that?
Well, it's interesting. When I first started doing work with HomeSite, which is a home ownership, and we were doing stuff in the central area, and we came up with this, which it sounds like you all do as well, with what we called equity note, where we wanted to sell the houses at the appraised value, because ironically, in the central area at that time, we did not want those values to go down. And so if someone would qualify, you know, the house was $100,000, they'd qualify for $60,000, we'd do a note for the balance, and it would have, you know, it'd be deferred and forgiven over time. And the irony is, of course, now, the last thing we want to do is those values going up. So that's, you know, kind of historically how things have changed. And one issue we're looking at now, which is really fascinating, I'd be interested in some other perspectives, is in some areas, like in Portland, they have a policy where there's preference in neighborhoods that have been gentrified, that when they're doing redevelopment, people who had lived there before or whose families had been have a priority to come back, and whether that violates fair housing. Because in some ways, the whole idea behind fair housing was to get out of the redlining, and now you're coming up with a program that you're giving a preference to the people that were displaced to come back to that same area. So, you know, we've been looking at that. Portland has a program, and so I'd be curious your all's thoughts, because it is a really, you know, it's two sides to the same coin there. Is you want people not displaced, but you want something so that the people who had been redlined there are the ones that come back, and, you know, do you end up with a segregated community again?
So Tina, how is gentrification significantly become an issue in the city of Tacoma, which we both know about the Hilltop? Maybe talk about the Hilltops gentrification.
One thing I'd like to emphasize for folks is for traditionally, areas that are traditionally ethnic, like Tacoma's Hilltop area and Seattle CD, educate the families of those original homeowners not to let that property go. And I'd really like to see that title companies don't release certain information about how long someone's lived in a property, so that investors could call and irritate them. I am so tired of those folks ringing my phone. I am. Also, I'd like to see maybe some legislation enacted that there can't be these series of these Wall Street landlords. I think there should be some preference set aside for families, for individuals who want to purchase homes, and that maybe there's a limit on the number of homes that corporate landlords could buy. I think maybe they should kind of stick to multifamily, you know, because people expect a corporation to own that, but not so much single family, because it's single family, and the operative word is family. And so I think those are two ways that we could work on gentrification, you know, limit corporate interests and limit folks ringing my phone.
Well, what time is it right now? Today, I've gotten 2 calls today. I have a house in Tacoma, in the central district of Tacoma, and I've gotten 2 calls today. People want to buy that house, and I get calls every day just about. So it is a concern.
Well, you know, I think part of the issue is, well, when HGTV went live, suddenly everybody is a developer. Lots of amateurs getting into the business because they've seen it on TV. So that is a factor. And then whoever thought that there would be a thing like Airbnb, those short-term rentals. And that's an issue as well for a variety of reasons. Thank you.
Jessica, you're on the lender side of things, but I'm sure you see sometimes of gentrification in neighborhoods.
So I can share a story. I actually just closed a transaction last week, and I'm sure they'd be okay with me sharing this, the Seck family. She's actually a really good friend of mine, and her grandmother passed away about 2 years ago at this point. And obviously, there was a home in the Central District the grandma owned for years. You know, everybody go to Big Mama's house for Sunday dinner. It's a revolving door, everyone's welcome. So grandma and grandpa passed away, so now the family has the matter of the home. And typically in our community, we just don't have the trust set up and all the things like we should, the estate planning. And so that was the situation for this family. Their family was dealing with another lender at another company, and basically, long story short, my friend's mom was trying to purchase the family home so that they didn't have to put it on the market and obviously, like an investor, get the property. My friend sent me over the loan estimate. I was like, Jess, can you look at this? It just seems like it's really expensive. This lender was charging them, I want to say, almost $30,000 in points to buy down the interest rate in today's market. And I'm like, Jazz, this isn't right. Like, we have this new covenant program, and I started to talk to her about the program and how it would give the 20% down and how the rate was amazing, right? Especially for a DPA program. And it's not like this family came from a whole bunch of money. They were trying to build this in through the equity of the home and have the sellers gift this money, to cover the closing costs. So basically taking away the wealth from this family that was in this property. So long story short, we were able to get the mom and her husband pre-approved through the Covenant Home Loan Program. They actually just closed on the house last week because of this program. There were no points. There were none of that, right? And she made this big post on social media, what that meant to her family to be able to keep her mom's house in the family. And when she closed, she called me with gratitude, obviously, right? And she's sitting on the front porch while we're talking. And she's like, I did it. Like, I saved my mom's house, right? So I think when you ask, what can we do? I think we're doing it. The Covenant Home Loan, was the best thing that could happen for our community. And having personal people that I know that are impacted by it, I think that there's still obviously a lot more work to do. So one thing we could do is maybe increase the income limits on the program, because the cost of living is high, you guys. Even though people make a decent amount of money, they have 4 or 5 kids, 3 kids, that money goes quick. I don't know about you, but I haven't went to the grocery store and spent under $100 in a couple years, right? And so I think if we were able to increase those income limits on the program to allow even more people to take advantage of it, it would allow more people to move back into King County in the Central District areas. So I think that would be a big piece. But I'm grateful for the work and the progress that is being made, because I get to see the people every day that are impacted. So, yeah.
Jessica, you touched a nerve with me. If some of you have maybe heard the news about Seattle closing 100 schools, it's because there's no families in Seattle because it's so expensive. And this is a thing about, of course, talking about ethnic right here in the CD and keeping families in there. But the speech that Ben Jealous gave hit me really hard, because my family owned property. They were becoming prosperous after Jim Crow, well, before Jim Crow in the 1860s onto the 1880s. And we had that property taken from our family. So both sides of my family, my mom and my dad's family. And now in our family, we don't want to sell property. We still own my mom's lot. The house is long gone. But my mom, that lot's not worth any money, but it won't be sold in her lifetime. And probably not in my lifetime, because my parents have passed that down to me. Thank you. Not that I go. My mother thankfully owns her home free and clear, and she's made it clear that I can't sell it. So it's a family thing of, you've been hurt, you don't let go of those things. Yes. And so my kids all know this, so I told them it's up to them to keep it. So they're mentally now preparing themselves to keep that asset in the family. Right. It's just something you got to do in these day and ages because it's so hard. So Jessica, thank you. And those tears are real tears because I feel them.
Yes, they are.
Ooh, next question. How can we reform the mortgage lending process, and you said part of it, to make it more equitable for low-income and minority home buyers? And Mark, from an affordable apartment perspective, how can we reduce financial barriers for housing developers of color? We'll start with you, Mark. You mentioned part about BIPOC, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the commission has done a great job of that in terms of on their allocation and the points that you receive for having BIPOC and community-based organizations participate in those projects. I think a lot of it is going to be having experienced developers.
Have you ever felt held back by
oh, whoa. It's listening to you. It's listening to you.
She's got more questions.
I don't know where that came from.
I think part of it would be to have, and I know there's a lot of more experienced developers out there, is really provide mentorship to some of these smaller, new emerging BIPOC developers. Because it's really hard, and one of the really crucial aspects of that are the guarantees, because your lenders and investors are requiring guarantees. And as a small emerging organization, you don't have the balance sheet. So I think it's, that joint venture and how those relationships work, because I think it really is building capacity and building a balance sheet is really what's crucial. And that takes time. And so I think the idea that, tomorrow you're going to see a bunch of BIPOC developers developing projects on their own, it's not going to happen. And so I think it's that mentorship that's really important.
Mark, you mentioned also about complications and how difficult it is. Isn't Section 42 one of the largest sections of the tax code?
It's crazy. It is. I can't remember how many pages it is, but it is one of the largest sections. That's the low-income housing tax credit. And I was going to say last night, and luckily my clients were there because they'd all be going back checking their partnership agreements, but the only C I ever made in law school was in tax. But yeah, I mean, so the tax code, it's incredibly complicated how these projects work. And people say, well, why don't we get rid of that and just have grants? Because as strange as it is in the tax credit world, grants are bad because they create income tax issues. Grants are bad, so we have to play around with it. And people say, let's get rid of the tax credit program and just have grants, which would be much simpler. But as I say, do you know how hard it is to change the tax code, either for the better or the worse? They can't get anything done back there. But can you imagine if you had to go every year and get an appropriation for a program? And so I think, that's why we have the tax credit program. And ironically, the IRS is involved in the development of more multifamily housing than HUD or any other agency. So it'd be nice if it could be simplified, but if simplifying it means risking it being there and risking the benefits, then let's just leave it like it is.
And Mark said something I hope you really caught on to. The low-income housing tax credit part of the IRS code creates more affordable housing units than HUD. That's something to think about. That's a powerful statement. Thank you, Mark, for that comment. Tina, how would you look at reforming the mortgage industry to make equitable buying more easier to do?
One of the things I would like to see is more apprenticeship in the appraisal industry, because it's sort of an old boys network and it's hard to get into, and there certainly aren't a lot of people of color involved because there's a lot of there's some barriers there, and I'd like to see those barriers lifted so that appraisals can be more equitable, and I think that would help. It would help lenders, it will certainly help sellers, it will help a lot of folks that are involved in the industry, just because appraising, it's not a science, it's an art, and it's an opinion. So if we had more, a higher variety of opinions, then I think we could move forward and have more equity.
And Jessica, you're deep into it right now. So reforming the mortgage market, you mentioned about larger down payment assistance, higher income limits. What other things do you think could be done to help create more equity in home ownership?
Honestly, I think those two things are major players in it, because increasing that AMI, like I say, there's people that I meet with that are outside of the income limits for the Covenant program. And so we put them in an alternative program that we have in-house, but the down payment's not as significant, right? And so then you deal with, great, I'm pre-approved now, but this mortgage payment's high, right? And it's uncomfortable. So there's another barrier there, affordability. And so I think increasing that AMI to like 140% would be super helpful. It'll help get a lot more people in homes, and with that 20% down payment, helps it become way more affordable, and it removes the mortgage insurance, right? Those are extra fees that they just don't have the money to spend. And it'll put them back in the neighborhoods where they truly desire to live, where their kids go to school, things like that, and where they work, most importantly, which reduces the commute, saves them gas, and it's good all the way around. I think that right there is big on my plate because I see it every day.
Yeah. As far as appraisals go, I can talk to appraisals because I remember I bought my home, and Mark knows I'm a lover of yard, gardening, and so forth.
He's a gentleman farmer.
So I had a suburban home. I had this beautiful manicured lawn, hanging baskets. Inside of my house was well kept because my mother taught me to keep house. But my house, you could tell an ethnic person lived there by some of the artwork. And the appraiser came in and appraised my house, and it was enough to get done what I wanted to get done, but the value was low. And my neighbor on the corner had a house smaller than mine, terrible yard. House was kind of beaten down. And we're talking one day, and I said, yeah, I just had my house appraised for, to refinance. He goes, yeah, I got mine done too. And he gave me his value, and I was like, you came in at what? And mine was significantly lower than his value. So fast forward to when I'm going to sell that house. I'm smarter now. I learned better this time. I cleaned the house up again, made sure it was perfect. I de-ethnicized the house, whatever you want to call it, and my value came in a lot better. And it was sad to see that happen, but it's real. I mean, we think this is something written out there in the hinterlands, but it's real. It happens right here in the Seattle area and all across the country. And appraisals are under assault now again. They're working on new ways of trying to make it better. So hopefully it happens.
I can attest to that. My husband's a real estate agent, and literally one of the things he does when he's doing his walkthrough is telling people to take down the photos, take down certain artwork, things like that, because we see it every day when these reports come in. There is a difference when we're doing disputes and things like that. So that is something that real estate agents are actually coaching their clients on to help them get a more favorable outcome on those appraisal reports.
Yep. So, and before we get to the question, I got one more question before we get to the audience. How can policymakers, lenders, developers, and housing advocates work together to close the racial and income homeownership gap? Again, we'll start with you, Jessica.
I just think what we're doing, the collaboration, working together with each other, and I think that, I don't know, for me, I feel like some of the lenders could do a better job of showing up in community, right? Like when this program came out, and I was attending meetings, I would look around and see the amount of lenders that actually showed up consistently to the meetings. But when you compare it to the ones that show up when there's like a check involved, right? And so I feel like if we had that same ratio when the check is involved with the community advocacy part, we'd be a lot further along. So I think lenders showing up, doing the work too, because we're better together. And the more people that are out spreading the word, educating people, the bigger impact we can have. So I just think continuing the collaboration, and then whatever our community organizations need, like we're here. Like for me, I didn't know what to do to become like an advocate. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I know how to do mortgages, right? And so it was Nicole Bascom that kept calling, like, are you ready to do the work, Jess? And I'm like, let me open my branch, Nicole, like, because I don't want to burn out. Let me get my branch open, and then I'm all in, because I'm the type of person, if I'm not going to give my all, I'll just hold off until I'm in a place where I can show up. And so I started showing up, and then here we are here, and it happened quickly. And then it's like we're changing lives, and it feels good. And so I think just the more people we can get involved to be troops in the street to help spread the word, spread the gospel, I think we'll make progress.
And team, since you're in home ownership, we'll follow with you before we get to Mark.
It's one word. It's advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. And people having open minds about different ways to complete the task.
Great. And Mark, multifamily.
Well, she said advocacy, 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 multifamily, money, money, money. We just need more funding. People talk about the affordable housing and the homeless crisis, but we could come a long way towards solving it if we decided, just like, some of the projects in Seattle about cleaning up Lake Washington. How many billions of dollars were that? Why don't we do that to solve part of the homeless and the affordability crisis? So money, money, money.
It's that will. The money is there. We know we have the money. It's that
Well,
will.
I don't think so.
Could push back on it.
Well, look, the prices of property, how much they're going up, vacant land, and you guys have the LAP program. But years ago, we could have had it where it wasn't just you, but some of the, the Gates Foundation, others. There was money for groups to buy land and land bank it. But that money wasn't there. I hate to say this, but I do a lot of work in Oregon, and they have a lot more money than Washington does through their state. They have all kinds of different programs. So I think there's some money, but we have projects that are underfunded. Which is why we're putting 5, 6, 7 layers of financing together, which, if you just had 1 or 2 sources with the more money, I think that would do a lot more. So I think you guys do a great job, but in the bigger picture, we need more money to finance these projects because they're way too expensive and there's too many layers. And if we could just get 1 or 2 sources which had more, I think that would help a lot. And it would save on transaction costs, others, so I think it would go a lot farther.
When Mark talks about layers of financing, each layer has its own rules. So now you got to make sure that the money you're getting matches up. If it doesn't match up, it has to go out. Or if you got to take it, now you can make your project more difficult not only to develop, but to manage long term. So that's an important part. So let's get down to 1 or 2 layers, and I'd appreciate that. The deal I did with the most layers, I think, had 13 layers in it. That was a zoo. I think you're probably involved in that deal too, but it was just outrageous because everybody's got a lawyer. It's a lot of marks in that deal. Okay.
Yeah, but it's the banks that are the big costs, right? Well, the other thing is not just the banks, but who carries when you see one of these closings on one of these big deals? The closing costs are crazy, and it's the bank fees and underwriters' fees and bond issuers' fees and everybody's attorneys. And who pays that? It's the borrower. It's all part of the borrower, part of those development costs. And so that's another thing where, the borrower, the nonprofit, the smaller developer is bearing all those enormous costs, and the more layers of financing and the more complicated, the more those costs are.
Yep. And delays happen because it takes longer and longer to put those all together. Here's a question for you, Mark. I'm going to weave this in for you. What are some of the current challenges that are making it so hard to build rental housing right now?
Costs, lack of funding. See, I keep hitting on these. Lack of good sites. A lot of the reasons the affordable housing costs so much more is because they're bad sites. They're, infills with, the amount of money you need to take just to do the excavation. And so I think that's really hard. And is there a way some of these big developments, outside the inner city, they have flat land, you have room for mobilization, try and do an infill project in the central area of Seattle. In the land, it's real steep, you have to deal with that. Where do you have all your building supplies and materials? Maybe you have to rent property next door, you have to close the street down. So I think it's a lot of those are one of the reasons it's so expensive. And then you have all the rules and regulations from every party. And some of it, a lot of this business, like if you're politically progressive, you're in support of labor and unions, but then when you're trying to do a project and you have to pay commercial wage rates, that can increase the cost of a project by 10, 15, 20%. So how's that balance come in? So I think it's trying to balance all of these and streamline the process.
That is so true. We got about 10 minutes left. I have one last question that we'll all get to answer here. And put on your prognosticating hat. Looking ahead, what are the biggest challenges we face in the next decade in creating equitable access to affordable housing, and how should we prepare for them? Jessica.
Inventory is a big deal that I foresee being an issue. You know, this debt relief program that's coming out, I actually like it, so I think that's going to help a lot, but I think there needs to be more funding for it, just because my pipeline alone of the people I'm going to be sending over to get those resources, I can only imagine how many more people are out there that actually need that help too. So I think helping people with debt issues, their current debt loads, and then inventory are going to be issues. How we solve those issues, I'm not exactly sure.
Well, we're working on that. We'll
Yeah.
get that later on. Tina, what do you see next decade?
Oh, in the next decade, I agree with Jessica. Inventory is going to be an issue. Folks are going to have to think differently on their concept of size. Being out here in the West, our mindset has always been lots and lots of space, whereas those who are from the East Coast, they're used to being a little more compact. So we have to change how we look at the concept of space, and that maybe you may not be able to have that single family home with, you know, third of an acre or whatever as your yard. So there's that. So also I just see that I lost my train of thought. So I will go with the concept of space and inventory. Thank you.
Mark?
I'm going to have to echo what you said in terms of supply and the amount that's out there. And I think particularly in the Seattle area, it's really hard because, you know, we're kind of bottlenecked. We have the mountains on one side and the water on the other. And so where do we grow? What is the way that we provide more housing over the next decade? And this is, again, one of those tensions. Do we need to, we have the Greenbelt area, which we all love for one reason, but that makes it more and more difficult to develop housing and give us more space. And I think you're right. It's figuring out what the size is, and zoning changes, where, you know, again, it's one of those things. Everybody wants their single-family neighborhood, but can you do accessory dwelling units? Can you, you know, and I think those are the challenges that we're going to have to face, is the world's changing, and how do we deal with that? And I think it really is supply. I think that's a key thing. And again, money. How are you going to pay for it?
Questions from the audience? Any questions you have for the panel?
I have a question.
Please, Mark.
What, from your all's perspective, doing home ownership, so what do you think Vice President Harris's proposal for the down payment assistance? I think it's, what is it?
$25,000.
$25,000 grant for down payment assistance.
It's a grant, yes.
It's a grant.
Okay, I'm grateful. I come from a space of gratitude. So any grants are great, but $25,000 is not going to put a dent in what we're experiencing, especially here in Washington State, in the cost of homes. We have a program now that gives up to $150,000, and sometimes that's not exactly adequate, but it's putting, you know, it's making an impact, right? And so $25,000 is cute. I don't know what else to say about it, but we're grateful that it's a grant and that you don't have to pay it back, and so that is good. But I think it needs to be something bigger.
As you know, it's the coast. Housing is expensive on the coast. We have the quote-unquote flyover states where housing is more affordable compared to income. So it's a challenge. $25,000 is a step in the right direction. So as you said, we want to be thankful for it, but you almost wish they had some balancing act. Here in Washington State, we are blessed. I'm honored to work for a housing finance commission that's seen across the country as very progressive, very forward-thinking, looking at solutions, working with our stakeholders and our partners to create this ecosystem. Again, Saturday I'll be in Phoenix meeting with our national group, And it's kind of humbling to have them always telling us that we're so lucky. We're so lucky that we live in a place that has these resources. But we're blessed, but we've worked hard to get to where we're at. But it takes many hands that we have in the audience to help us get to the next level. And 10 years from now, I may not be sitting in this seat. It may be one of you sitting in this seat. So we really hope that you folks will keep the passion, as Ben Jealous says, and find a lane you're best in and push forward. Anna. Let me repeat the question for our audience. Anna was talking about, does Mark's firm do any mentorship or help with getting future lawyers into this business? Or know anyone that does?
No. I mean, I'm being honest, and I think we'd love to do that. One of the challenges we have is being a really small law firm. And I wouldn't say the resources in terms of financially, because we could probably do that, but in terms of personnel and people. And frankly, we're doing so much of what several of us do is mentoring our younger attorneys. And we are, I think, for a firm our size, we are pretty mixed racially and economically, so maybe that's part of it. But in terms of an outreach or program, we don't. But I think that's something that's a great idea. And to the extent, like Seattle University or one of the law schools, wanted to do that, it's something that we should look into. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I hope someone gets through college that can't afford it.
Yeah, that might be a little more difficult, but I think that mentorship, and we do speak and participate, but that's a great idea.
And Cantor Taylor is one of our sponsors for this event here, so they're involved, and every hand that we can get involved helps. I can tell you the commission has a program we have where we take lots of interns from the University of Washington and other schools in the Northwest, where we help them for a year, and we pay them with the intent that they may not work for the commission, but they'll work in the industry. And so we have more partners that are doing that. So we're hopeful we'll get these hands that will replace us in the future. They'll see this lane as their future, and they will make changes that we could never dreamed of. So with that, I want to thank the panel and thank you, the audience, and
Thank
appreciate you coming in.
Thanks.